What is up, Liron here. Thank you for joining me in another video. In this one, I'm going to teach you how to paint this beautiful sailboats scene. It's going to be interesting. There's going to be a lot of negative painting, creating a sense of depth, light, and three-dimensionality. And I really hope you're going to enjoy this one. Let's get started. So as always, our basis for a good painting is a good, or at least a decent drawing. We're going to keep this one very simple. So we have the sea that's about a third the length of the side of the paper, so I'm just placing in a line representing that, and I'm gonna really try and make this a little simpler for beginners, though I cannot make any promises. So now we have a couple of sailboats and the buildings from behind. I'm gonna start by placing the sailboats because they're at the front. They're gonna be a little more unique and individual. I'm starting with symbolism, and I'm gonna tell you why in just a moment. So one sailboat is kind of here. Another sailboat I'm gonna place around there. Another one, let's do that kind of here. Let's do another one. Let's make this one smaller. Let's make this one a little larger. Bit of a tiny one here. Perhaps another small one there, and we're done. Now, the reason I've been doing this symbolism is because I want to do the placement of the boats without committing too much to anything. Because this is a rather simple piece, okay? It's not necessarily easy, but it's a simple painting. It's just a couple of sailboats. So what makes it interesting or unique is the composition. And you have to make sure you avoid equal lengths. That can be a bit boring. You want to make sure you avoid that kind of thing to keep this interesting. So I'm going to place one sail is going to be somewhere around here. I'm making it a little bit taller than I see it, just to keep it a little more varied and interesting. That's one sail, kind of like that, and it connects to a boat that is a little sideways like this, goes around here like that. So that's one boat, and I'm not going to do any more details than that. Probably that's enough to work with. Now, as you can see, I'm starting with the larger boats, okay, because these I just want to place in the more detailed stuff first. I usually do that just out of the logical kind of way of approaching it. You want to make sure you take care of the main elements first, in my opinion, so that you get a nice little result. There are going to be a couple of waves here and sparkles on the water that I'll be sure to try and preserve. I can't promise I will succeed. So now we have another boat kind of in the distance here, with the sail going like that, and you can barely see any details on that one. Then we have another one far at the back here, another sail. Let's make this one a little thinner just to keep it interesting, like that. We have another one really close to that one but behind it, okay, and like so. And again, you see you don't need much detail here. And another one to the side that I want to make a little larger in terms of the actual sail, so kind of like this, okay? And it's a little behind this one, but still quite close. So we're done with the sails. Now I want to put in the skyline, so to speak, of the buildings. This is actually where the shore is, okay? It's not really necessarily a horizon line, it's where the shore is gonna be. So there's gonna be a lot of sparkle and kind of warm looking rocks here, okay? Now here I'm going to start placing in the buildings. Now you want to make sure to take into consideration how the buildings meet the sails. So you don't want to have a building kind of touching the edge of the sail. So I'm going to avoid that and imagine the buildings here at the back, kind of like so. And then it has another building really close to that here. Then a bit of a gap through the middle. A taller, more distinct building here with a shape that's a little clearer than the rest. Kind of like that. Add a bit of details here on the rooftop, a bit of an antenna here as well. This will all help us later on when painting this. Now we do have a couple of smaller, farther buildings here at the back. This continues here. We have a bit of a gradual kind of building. I don't know how to say that, how to call that kind of thing. And here we have another one a little more at the back. So here we have everything we need. We can actually start painting this. I'm just gonna again do a pattern here showing me an approximate position for the sparkles. Now what I want to do, let's talk about strategy for the next wash. I'm going to cover the sky with a very light wash. And that light wash will actually, I think, cover everything, including the sails. Or you know what, we'll skip the sails, we'll do the buildings, we'll just skip these shapes, okay? We'll do negative painting around those, around all of the sails. And then when we get to this part, we're gonna stop, because this is gonna be a highlighted kind of yellowy area, and I don't want it to blend together. And then for the water, we're gonna try and get them in one go very dark, and also keep some sparkles for the whites of the waves crashing, okay? So let's prepare everything for painting and get started. So we'll get started, and I like to not waste paint, so I'm actually using what I have here, re-wetting it, and in just a few moments I'm gonna add a bit more blue to it, so it's gonna make sense. Even though the sky isn't a perfect blue here, it actually has a bit of red in it, which means we can use a bit more French ultramarine perhaps, just to keep it a little more on the warmer side. So I'm just adding some French ultramarine here, and that way I can save up my paint. I don't have to waste too much by cleaning the palette. Now I know some are against that, that's perfectly fine. If you like a perfect clean palette, you should aim for that, okay? I'm just offering you my way. Even in the last video about not using black paint pre-mixed from the tube, it's just my opinion. So really, you can do whatever you feel like is right. So I'm going to start top to bottom. The sky isn't too dark, but I do want them to have some presence. So let's add a bit more blue directly to it. That's what I like to do. I like to sometimes wet the surface and then come back with some paint. Now remember, we have to watch out for those sails. So I'm painting negatively around them. I'm using a brush that does have a nice pointy tip to it, the silver black velvet brush, which allows me some level of control, okay? A bit more French ultramarine. I like to go crazy with this stage, and you know how I kind of do that, and I'm fine with that. I did mess up this sail, but I'm not gonna worry about it too much, because they will, honestly, you know what? Let's clean it up just a bit. The sails are gonna be, for the most part, darker, but I do paint negatively around them right now, because I wanna have that choice later on, okay? So to be quite frank, they will be darker, but I want to have that chance to darken them with a different paint as well later on. So here we go around that. Notice how I paint right through the buildings. The buildings are fairly darker than the sky, so I can afford myself to paint through them. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Like so. We're gonna connect this small part underneath the boats. And finally we have this one. My wash isn't going to be 100% even, I can sense it, and that's fine. Here we go a bit. Let's strengthen this area up. Negative painting is something you have to practice. Don't worry if it doesn't come naturally or if it takes time, that's part of watercolor. The biggest part about watercolor painting is there's a significant learning curve. That's just part of it. So now I'm going to start with the ocean itself. And I'm going to leave a couple of highlights for the boats, and again for some light on some highlights on the wavy area, kind of like that, some sparkles. I'm not an expert in that kind of thing, so you will forgive me if the result isn't as good as you'd hope it to be. Now this seems incredibly dark, but you can be rest assured, if that's a way of saying it, that it will dry up much lighter, okay? So it may seem super dark, but we actually need that darkness to capture the light, and I am painting around the boats, kind of like that, and I think we have some nice little sparkles on the water to hold this together later on when we will add some details, maybe in a white gel pen, we can add some more individual kind of wavy shapes to this that'll make it look even better. So now I'm just doing wet and wet. Okay, I want to make the most out of this wash, so I'm using a lot of paint, and you have to use a lot of paint here if you really want to get that wet and wet feeling across. I'm breaking apart some of these highlights because I don't want them to be too striking. Because it's so dark to begin with, you want a strong mix, so I'm taking a lot of the phthalo blue paint, and I love phthalo blue. As you know, it helps me achieve the darker values I'm after. And I think with that, we're pretty much done with this wash. I'm gonna allow it some time to dry and come back and start adding in the details. We did leave a couple of gaps here. That's not too terrible. We're gonna cover these up later on. And they're gonna be, some of them are gonna be for the boats as well, so that's fine. But in any case, let's let this one go and come back. So I allowed this one to fully dry in the sun. Luckily, we have some natural light here, which really helps. The next step is to start putting in the buildings while taking into consideration all the boats. And for the buildings, I also want to create some interest, so I'm not going to use just one color. I'm going to probably mix a bit of a mixture of all of my primary colors. If you like clean, beautiful palettes, my apologies about that. I've been known to never clean up my palettes too much, really, only for specific tutorials or some very specific uses. So again, I apologize in advance. That's the way I do things, and feel free to do it your way. And if you're gonna learn from me, the palette's gonna be a little messy, so sorry about that. Let's get started here. And I'm gonna start left to right with the buildings. Now, you wanna make sure they're not too dark, but also not too light. You want, basically you want it to hold the light well, and in order to hold the light well, you need to have some kind of a balance. So let me add a bit more water to it. I feel like this is a little too strong. So that's that. And trying to get in the interest and the information without too many details. Here we have that kind of structure up top. Maybe a bit of another one here, and this one's done. I do want to preserve some highlights around the bottom, and I'm gonna soon paint also this bright yellowy section here in just a few moments. Painting around the sail, that's important. Filling in some gaps here and there, kind of impressionistically. I will also, let's add a bit of details to this one. I feel like it'll be a good opportunity. Sorry about the skewing due to the slight angle of the camera. Hopefully you can still tell the shapes of everything well. Now what I like to do is not use the same blend. I'm going to add a bit of, let's say, red here and just test it out a bit. I like to have some variation, and that's a good way of also directing the viewer's attention in many cases. So here we go, a bit of that. Now you can use a bit of a smaller brush. I'm going to stick to that one because this is the background. I don't want to worry about it too much, but definitely feel free to use a bit of a smaller brush, and that can work well for many people. I know people don't like when I necessarily recommend using a specific size of brush because it is very personal, I will admit, and I'm perfectly fine with whatever you do. It's all just recommendations what I'm giving here, so you have to find your own kind of approach and your own way of doing things, and find out what works for you. This is purely recommendation, so you can widen the spectrum of things you can do. And then you can feel free to change them up, do things your way. So warming it up a little with this building. And I'm gonna create this gap here just to indicate that this is another side of the building. And I'm gonna add some more details. This is kind of the most prominent one in the scene, so I do wanna have some more details on that one. Not too much though. Keeping some highlights here at the bottom. Let's connect some of these areas as well. And all of these help to introduce a background, but you don't need a lot. You don't need much of a background here. I'm gonna blue it up next to the edge of the painting once again. Maybe even lighten it up a bit. So a couple of buildings here. Get rid of some of the water in the brush. I do that often. I just wipe it on the towel. Sometimes the brush gets a little too wet and you lose some of the control. That's the main thing. That's the main problem. Other than that, if it's a large surface, I need a wet brush, but you know. So here is the front side of this building. I got a more interesting with the gradual change of angles around the bottom. I think also here there's an opening between the sails, so I'm going to indicate that and continue along the way. Here we go. We're done with the buildings. Now let's switch to a smaller brush. Start working on the rocks here. So this is a bit more of an orangey area. I'm going to overpower the blue with a bit of yellow and red, and I know they're contaminated. Sorry about that. Again, this is how I work. You find your own way. bit of raw sienna or Verona Gold Ochre, I believe it's this one. And I do want it to be more orange, so I'm going to add a bit of burnt sienna to it, like so. Yeah, that's good. That's a little more orange-brown. Maybe even, you know what, the quinacridone burnt orange. I'm just going to put in a bunch of paints here until I find something I like. But I have to keep it light, okay? Because it's going to be a highlight, actually. So I'm just going to start placing in some random structures of rocks. Kind of like that. I don't care that they bleed a bit into the buildings at the back, but you know what, on second thought, I do have to be a little more careful. Because otherwise, I'm going to get too many cauliflowers and blossoms of doom. I'm going to try and watch out just a bit. But this will be enough to indicate some kind of a maybe shoreline, or you know, the wave breakers or something like that. Hopefully it'll make sense to the viewer. And with that, we're done. We can start indicating the sails and the boats and all of that good stuff. So for the sails, I'm going to actually use kind of a bluish gray, or even a green, slightly green blue. So I'm using a bit of undersea green, a bit of phthalo, a bit of French ultramarine, a bit of the leftovers I had here. Remember that the color isn't as relevant as the value. That's always my perspective on it, at least. So don't be too worried about the specific color you're using, really. You don't have to have it a perfect match to anything, really. So here we go. That's the shaded part of the sail. We have a bit of a highlight here. Plus, on the right side, it's lighter, so I'm going to add a bit more water and allow these to kind of meet. I need it to be a little bluer, so a lot of water, a bit of phthalo blue, and let these meet around the center, kind of like that. Hopefully I won't get too much bleeding onto the buildings here. We have that smaller boat. I'm going to add also a bit of blue while preserving some highlights, okay? The light generally, I believe, comes from the right, but it's a bit hard to tell. It could be from up top as well. I think it comes from up top. So I'm gonna have to take that into consideration. So just putting in a bunch of sails here. The impression may not be perfect. I don't know why lately I don't get as much of a realistic impression, but I do get a bit more of a personalized look. So it's kind of a trade-off that I'm willing to make for now. But maybe I'm gonna take a break and focus maybe shortly in a few weeks on just producing a bit of a more believable feeling. Okay, I may do that. I don't know. But in any case, here we go. Now let's put in the bodies of the sailboats. So a bit of blue, both blues. We're gonna have some deeper shadows here. So let's get started with this one, and the value should be similar to that of the ocean. So I'm putting in a bit of blue, like so, but I'm preserving some parts at the top because I'm gonna put a bit of red onto it in just a moment. So here we have another shadow on the inside of the boat, kind of like that. Again, the shape's not gonna be perfect. That's fine. So I'm gonna get a bit of red here, and I'm just gonna place it up top, like so. See? And hopefully it will stick out or stand out as red. I'm actually gonna add some to the other boats as well, just for fun. A bit of red here, a bit of red there. Sometimes while I have a paint on hand, I will use it for other details as well. The boats farther at the back, I want to use a bit of a gray mix. So I'm adding a bit of blue to this, because I want to keep them at the back. I don't want them to pop up too much. So here we go, a bit of this grayish muted mix. A bit for this one as well. These boats a little closer. I'm going to add a bit more red and yellow. And again, these aren't perfect colors. It's general red and general yellow, like so. This one as well. I'm going to add some other details in just a moment. So some people, let's keep this one a bit white. You know what? Let's have it facing towards the sun or the light. With the one on the very right, it's almost orange. So I'm actually going to indicate that with a bit of quinacridone burnt orange. So here we go. And a bit of red, perhaps. Sorry about the light. It's changing quite frequently today. Hopefully that won't hurt the video too much. But hopefully you can tell how there's an interesting sense of light and shadow at the very least. Near the bottom, I'm going to add a bit of darker shadows because I see them in the reference photo. Kind of like that, just to better anchor these onto the ground. Now what's really going to pull this painting together is the details I'm going to add now with this brush, okay? Just small details on the sails. I think it's okay to do them now, even though they're not fully dry, because what happens is we'll get an interesting kind of bleeding effect for some of the details, which is going to be nice. That's actually a lesson I learned from the previous painting. I made a mistake, but it actually was a happy accident. So I'm going to make this kind of a line here. And I'm going to start indicating the different, I don't know what you'd call these, but it's like the skeleton of the sail, because it's a part of the sail that holds it together, like that, and keeps its shape. I'm going to add a bit of a detail here up top. There is a bit of a writing on it, so let's do that. And actually, let's zoom in a bit on the boat so you can see the details, because right now that's the most relevant or important section of the painting. I'm going to add this little logo that I can see here, kind of like this, and it's a bit wavy. And then above that, this one I used red. Sorry if it doesn't come through the camera. That's because dark paint tends to not show very well. And then a bit of blue. That's the logo of the brand or whatever. There is a bit of a part that sticks out like that. And then at the very bottom, we have some very dark stripes under the sail. I'm going to add some people here in just a moment. With this one further at the back, maybe fewer details. So a bit of this, a bit of dots here, and we're done. This sail as well doesn't need much. Some very dry brush. Let's add a bit of paint here. And you can see that coming through. A bit of a shadow underneath. This one has a very strong phthalo-ish blue section on the right. Let's try and recreate that. I don't even know how that's going to turn out, but let's give it a shot with a bit of a more watery wash. A bit lighter. We need it to be a little lighter. There we go. Let's allow this paint to kind of spread towards the left, see what happens. And then I'm going to contrast that with some very dark sections. So, kind of like, let's see, it works like that. And you want to get the curve of the shape of the sail. That'll really help. A bit of an indication here at the top. This one's the closest to us, so I do want to have it be a little more prominent, a little more detailed, similarly to this one on the left. So we have this kind of thing, that kind of thing. I'm going to put this one for sale, maybe in the art fair or maybe on Instagram. We'll see about that. I'm actually very pleased with how it turned out. You know what? Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just hang it here. Kind of like the feeling of it. Let's see, like that. And now I'm going to continue with this one. I did want to put in the logo here at the back. A bit of this also, but then we have some parts that are slightly protruding, this part up top. Let's add a bit of red to the very bottom of the sail, so a bit warmer. I know it's hard to see because it's with a very dark paint. I'm thinking of another, let's do a bit of a writing here. Something like, it does show 2 on the other boat, so I'm going to use it for this one. I do that very often. I'll grab one element from one boat, for example, put it on another. You know, this is our artistic license to change things around. So here we have this sail, we have that sail, we've got a couple of these parts like that, and then we have a bit of these easy details. We're pretty much done here. I love the sparkling element of the water. Let's put in some people. So I'm going to use a bit of orange for the heads. I'm going to keep it very simple, impressionistic, Alvaro Castanet kind of style. So just a bunch of, you know, let's use this brush. Let's use my Princeton synthetic one I used earlier. I think it'll be a better match for this kind of task, not the too small brush here. A bunch of people. They're not really visible in the farther boats, but just a bit of it. The part that's really going to show them is their the actual body or figure, so kind of like that. One of them has a white shirt, kind of like this. Let's add a bit of a darker section here. Here we have also some figures, or whatever it is, some details of the boat. Same here, just a couple of dark shades also here. And let me think if I need any white highlights. I don't think I need anything more than that, really. I think that really covers it. Some shadows are a little darker, but I'm going to keep it that way because I kind of like the way it looks right now. I will use the white gel pen just to add a bit of a wavier shapes for waves, you know, a bit of a wavier feeling for them, because right now what I have is very few spots or dots, but not too much. I don't want to overdo it. So here we go, just a few touches here and there. And I'm just looking at the reference, figuring out what else it needs. Probably nothing really. Gonna make that edge a little more adjusted. There are a couple of, I don't know what it is, floaters or floaters or floaties. I don't know. Floaters I know is a nickname for something disgusting, so I won't mention it. A bit of foam around the boat. And this is pretty much done. Now on second thought, I decided to darken very slightly just some of the sails that are a little more prominent, because I feel like the contrast will do the painting good. So here we go. One that's darker, let's check it out. I think that works well. Maybe a bit of a stronger shadow on this one too. A bit of a darker, considering if I should play around with this one, because I like it. Let's leave it that way, but maybe let's add a bit of a fold kind of towards this area. That's slightly darker, and I think we're good. So with that, we can wrap it up. I also signed this. Let's wrap up this video. So this is it for this scene. I hope you were able to follow. Let me know in a comment down below if you have been able to, and what was your biggest takeaway. Again, this is a simple scene, but not an easy one necessarily to create. That's how it is with watercolor. Sometimes the simplest scenes work best, but they're not always easy, and you have to kind of have a basic control of the technique, okay? So let me know in a comment down below. Also, don't forget to give this video a like. That really helps me promote it on YouTube. And also subscribe and hit the bell button if you haven't. It means the world to me. It means you won't miss out on new videos, because YouTube doesn't always show my videos. It doesn't always send notifications, and probably you're missing. I get a lot of messages saying I missed a bunch of videos. So if you want to make sure to stay up to date on tutorials and other types of videos, be sure to hit the bell button. I want to thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again in another vid real soon.